A racist woman accused an elderly indigenous man of stealing from her. What the old man did before he died behind bars left everyone paralyzed. The crash of porcelain shattering against the floor echoed through the Valdez mansion. Amelia, her face red with anger, pointed accusingly at Mateo, the elderly gardener, who looked at her with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Thief! You're a damn thief!" Amelia screamed, her voice trembling with rage. "Where is it? Where have you hidden my necklace, Mateo?" With his calloused, earth-stained hands, Mateo took a step back, shaking his head. "Mrs. Amelia, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't touched anything of yours." "Liar!" Amelia lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar of his worn shirt. "That necklace has been in my family for generations, and you stole it." The commotion attracted several servants who peeked timidly through the living room door. Among them was Rosa, the housekeeper, who dared to intervene. "Madam, please calm down," said Rosa, approaching cautiously. "I'm sure there must be some misunderstanding." Amelia turned to her, her eyes flashing dangerously. Misunderstanding? The only misunderstanding was trusting this people. She spat the words as if they were poison. "Call the police now." While Rosa hurried out to make the call, Mateo tried to reason one last time. "Mrs. Amelia, please. I have worked for your family for decades. I have never taken anything that didn't belong to me." For an instant, something seemed to flicker in Amelia's eyes, a flicker of doubt, perhaps even remorse, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Silence!" she hissed. "I don't want to hear your lies." The minutes that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The police arrived, filling the mansion with the echo of heavy boots and hurried questions. Mateo, dazed, found himself handcuffed and shoved into a patrol car before he could fully understand what was happening. As they put him in the vehicle, he caught a glimpse of Elena, his granddaughter, who had just arrived and was watching the scene in horror. "Grandpa!" Elena shouted, running towards the car. "What's going on, Grandpa?" But the car sped off before she could reach it, leaving Elena standing in the middle of the driveway, tears streaming down her face, her heart pounding frantically. Amelia watched from the window, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. But deep in her eyes there was something else, something no one else could see, something that looked a lot like regret. At the police station, Mateo sat on a cold metal chair, his wrinkled hands resting on the interrogation table. Across from him, Detective Ramirez was leafing through a file, glancing occasionally at the old man. "Mr. Mateo," Ramirez began, closing the folder, "Mrs. Valdez claims that you stole a necklace from her private collection, a necklace valued at several million pesos." Mateo looked up, his eyes tired but firm. "Detective, I've worked for the Valdez since I was a boy. I've never stolen anything." Ramirez leaned forward. "Then how do you explain the necklace disappearing right after you were working in that area of the house?" Mateo hesitated, rubbing his forehead. "I was pruning the rose bushes near the study window, but I never went inside." "I swear." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that? Because we have the testimony of one of the maids who says she saw you leaving the study that afternoon." Mateo paled. That's not possible. I didn't." At that moment, the door burst open. Elena entered, followed closely by a man in a suit whom Mateo recognized as Javier, the family lawyer. "Stop this interrogation," Javier demanded. "My client will not say another word without my presence." Ramirez stood up, visibly annoyed. "Sir, you can't just barge into a police interrogation like this." "I can and I will," Javier replied, pulling out a card. "I am Mr. Mateo's lawyer, and I demand to speak with him in private." Elena ran to her grandfather, hugging him tightly. "Grandpa, are you okay? Don't worry, we'll get you out of here." Mateo, still dazed, stroked his granddaughter's hair. "Elena, my child, you shouldn't be here." "I'm not leaving you alone," she insisted, tears welling up in her eyes. Ramirez, resigned, nodded toward the door. "You have 10 minutes. Once alone, Javier sat down opposite Mateo. "Mr. Mateo, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, without omitting any details." Mateo took a deep breath. "Javier, boy, you've known me since you were a child. You know I'd never steal." "I know," Javier nodded, "but we need proof, something to prove your innocence." Elena intervened, her voice trembling with indignation. This is ridiculous. Mrs. Amelia has always been difficult, but to go to this extreme. Mateo took his granddaughter's hand. Elena, don't talk like that. Mrs. Amelia, she has her reasons for acting the way she does. Reasons? Elena almost yelled. She's accusing you of theft. Javier interrupted them. Let's focus on the facts. Mateo, did you see anything unusual that day? Anyone else near the study? Mateo frowned, struggling to remember. Well, now that you mention it, I saw Camila, Mrs. Amelia's daughter, leaving the study. She seemed upset. Elena and Javier exchanged glances. Camila? Elena asked. But she rarely comes to the mansion. I know, Mateo agreed. That's why it struck me as odd. But I didn't think much of it at the time. Javier scribbled notes quickly. This could be important. Mateo, are you sure of what you saw? As sure as the sun rises every morning, affirmed Mateo. The lawyer stood up. Good. This gives us a starting point. I'm going to request your release on bail. Elena, can you take care of raising the money? Elena nodded resolutely. I'll do whatever it takes. As Javier went out to speak to the detective, Elena moved closer to her grandfather. Grandpa, there's something I don't understand. Why would Mrs. Amelia do this? I always thought that despite everything, she had a certain fondness for you. Mateo closed his eyes for a moment, as if a painful memory had pierced him. Elena, my child, there are things from the past best left buried. But Grandpa… Elena, he interrupted gently, some stories are not meant to be told, at least not now. Before Elena could insist, Javier returned with news. I've managed to get you released on bail, Mateo, but you have to surrender your passport, and you can't leave the city. Mateo nodded, relieved. Thank you, boy. I don't know how to repay you. Don't worry about that now, Javier said. The important thing is to get you out of here and start working on your defense. As they left the police station, Elena couldn't help but notice the looks of contempt some officers threw at her grandfather. The news seemed to have spread quickly. Don't mind them, she murmured, squeezing Mateo's arm. We know the truth. Mateo nodded silently, but his gaze was lost in the distance, as if he were reliving moments from a distant past. Back at the Valdez mansion, Amelia paced nervously in her study. The sound of her heels against the marble floor echoed like a relentless metronome, marking the passing of the minutes. A knock on the door startled her. Come in, she said, trying to maintain her composure. Rosa entered, a look of concern on her face. Madam, I just found out. They released Mr. Mateo on bail. Amelia stopped short. What? How is that possible? Apparently his lawyer managed to arrange it, Rosa explained. Ma'am, if I may say so, this whole thing seems… Seems what, Rosa? Amelia challenged, her eyes flashing dangerously. Rosa swallowed. Nothing, ma'am. Forgive my boldness. Amelia sank into her armchair, massaging her temples. Rosa, get me a glass of brandy and then leave me alone. Yes, ma'am, Rosa nodded, hurrying to comply. Once alone, Amelia pulled an old photograph from her desk drawer. In it, a younger version of herself smiled alongside an equally young Mateo, both standing in front of a field of wildflowers. Oh, Mateo, she whispered, caressing the picture with her fingertips. How did we get here? The sound of the door opening startled her. She quickly put the picture away and composed herself. Mother? Camilla's voice echoed in the room. What the hell is going on? Is it true you accused Mateo of theft? Amelia stood up, facing her daughter. Camilla, don't you use that tone with me. And yes, it's true. Mateo stole your grandmother's necklace. Camilla looked at her incredulously. Are you listening to yourself? Mateo has been a part of this family for decades. Why would he do such a thing? People change, Camilla, Amelia replied coldly. Sometimes those we trust the most are the ones who disappoint us the most. No, Camilla shook her head. I don't believe it. There's more to this, isn't there? I've always noticed a tension between you. What aren't you telling me, Mother? For a moment, Amelia seemed vulnerable, but she quickly recovered. Don't be ridiculous, Camilla. There's nothing to tell. Mateo is a thief, and he will pay for what he did. Camilla took a step forward. Mom, please. Enough, Amelia shouted. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Mateo is guilty, period. End of story. Camilla backed away, taken aback by her mother's vehemence. Fine, but this isn't over. I'm going to find out what's really going on. As Camilla left, Amelia slumped back in her chair, the weight of her secrets crushing her. She picked up the glass of brandy Rosa had left and drained it in one gulp. Oh, Mateo, she murmured to herself. What have I done? At Mateo's small house across town, Elena helped her grandfather settle into his favorite old armchair. The old man seemed to have aged years in just a few hours. Grandpa, Elena said softly, I need you to tell me everything. There's more to this story, isn't there? Mateo sighed deeply. Elena, there are things from the past best left buried. But Grandpa, you're being accused of a crime you didn't commit. We can't just stand by and do nothing. The old man looked out the window, his eyes lost in distant memories. Amelia and our story is complicated. Elena sat down on the floor at her grandfather's feet. Tell me, please, I need to understand so I can help you. Mateo closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. It was many years ago, Mateo began, when we were both young. I had just started working at the Valdez mansion as an apprentice gardener. Amelia was different then, curious, full of life. Wait, Elena interrupted. Are you saying that you and Mrs. Amelia? Mateo nodded slowly. We fell in love. It was a forbidden love, of course. She was the boss's daughter, and I was a simple gardener. Elena listened with wide eyes, barely able to process this revelation. But how? What happened? Mateo smiled sadly. It was a magical summer. We met in secret in the gardens, shared dreams, promises. But autumn came too soon. What do you mean? Amelia's father found out about us, Mateo continued, his voice thick with pain. He was brutal, threatened to destroy my family if I didn't stay away from her. And Amelia? Elena took her grandfather's hand. What did she do? She chose her status, her life of privilege, Mateo replied. I don't blame her. We were young, and the weight of expectations was too great. But Grandpa, that was so long ago. Why is it coming up now? A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Elena got up to open it, finding herself face to face with Camilla, Amelia's daughter. Camilla? Elena asked, surprised. What are you doing here? Camilla, visibly nervous, looked over Elena's shoulder. I need to speak with Mateo. It's important. Elena hesitated for a moment, but finally stepped aside, letting Camilla in. Mateo straightened up in his armchair, his face a mixture of surprise and worry. Camilla, child, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Camilla approached, wringing her hands. Mateo, I need to know the truth. Did you really steal that necklace? Of course not, Elena interjected indignantly. My grandfather would never. Elena. Mateo interrupted softly, then turned to Camilla. No, Camilla, I didn't steal anything. But I suspect you know something about it. Camilla paled. I don't know what you're talking about. I saw you leaving the study that day, Mateo said, his voice firm but kind. You seemed upset. Tears welled up in Camilla's eyes. I'm so sorry. I took the necklace, but I never meant for any of this to happen. Elena stepped towards her. What? Why? Camilla slumped into a nearby chair. I have debts, a lot of debts. I gambled. I thought I could sell the necklace and replace it before anyone noticed. But when my mother discovered it was missing, she decided to blame Mateo. She did what? Elena finished, fury evident in her voice. Mateo raised a hand, calming his granddaughter. Camilla, your mother knows it was you? Camilla shook her head. No, I didn't have the courage to tell her. And when she accused you, I froze. Silence fell heavily over the room. Mateo closed his eyes as if making a difficult decision. Camilla, he said finally, you need to tell your mother the truth. I can't, Camilla sobbed. She'll hate me. She'll destroy us both. Elena, still furious but moved by Camilla's pain, knelt in front of her. Camilla, my grandfather is being accused of a crime he didn't commit. If you don't tell the truth, he could go to jail. Camilla looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I know, and it's killing me. But you don't understand. My mother, she's not what you think. There's so much you don't know. Mateo leaned forward. What do you mean, Camilla? Before she could answer, the screech of tires sounded outside the house. Through the window, they saw Amelia getting out of her luxury car, her face a mask of fury. Oh no, Camilla whispered. She followed us. The door flew open and Amelia stormed in. Camilla, what the hell do you think you're doing here? Her eyes darted around the room, coming to rest on Mateo. For an instant, something seemed to shift in her gaze. Pain, regret, but it was quickly replaced by anger. You, Amelia spat. It's not enough with what you've done? Now you're trying to manipulate my daughter? Elena stepped between Amelia and her grandfather. Enough! Your daughter came here of her own free will, and if anyone is manipulating anyone, it's you. Amelia stepped back as if she had been slapped. How dare you? You have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps we should all calm down, Mateo intervened, rising with difficulty. Amelia, please. It's been so many years. Don't you think it's time the truth came out? Amelia looked at him, and for a moment the mask slipped. Mateo, I can't. There's so much at stake. What are you talking about? Camilla asked, confused. Mom, what's going on? Amelia turned to her daughter, the internal struggle evident on her face. Camilla, there are things from my past, our past, she glanced at Mateo, that I never told you. Then tell me now, Camilla demanded, because I'm about to confess something, and I need to know I can trust you. The atmosphere in the small room was electric. Decades of secrets, lies, and repressed love threatened to explode at any moment. Mateo stepped forward, his presence momentarily calming the storm. I think it's time we all sat down and talked. The moment of truth has arrived. Amelia, for the first time in years, seemed vulnerable. Mateo, if we do this, if we reveal everything... I know, Mateo nodded, but don't you think we've lived long enough with these lies? Elena and Camilla exchanged glances, aware they were about to uncover secrets that would change their lives forever. Amelia finally nodded. Very well, but not here. Let's go back to the mansion. If we're going to dig up the past, let's do it where it all began. As they left the house, the sun began to set, dyeing the sky in shades of red and gold. It was as if the universe itself were setting the stage for the revelations to come. In the car on the way to the Valdez mansion, the silence was heavy. Everyone was lost in their thoughts, preparing for what was to come. Camilla, staring out the window, broke the silence. Mom, before we get there, there's something I need to tell you. The necklace, I took it. The car screeched to a halt on the side of the road. Amelia turned to her daughter, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. What did you say? Camilla, tears streaming down her face, confessed everything. The debts, the desperate plan, the fear that paralyzed her when Mateo was accused. Amelia listened silently, her expression unreadable. When Camilla finished, the silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Amelia spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Oh, Camilla, why didn't you come to me? I was scared, Camilla sobbed. Scared of disappointing you, of not being the perfect daughter you always wanted. Amelia closed her eyes as if battling an inner pain. Perfection? I've spent my entire life chasing an idea of perfection that doesn't exist. And look where it's gotten us. Mateo from the back seat leaned forward. Amelia, we can still fix this. Amelia looked at him through the rear-view mirror, and for a moment, time seemed to rewind. They were again those young lovers, full of dreams and hope. You're right, she said finally. It's time to face the truth. All of it. She started the car again, and in silence they continued their journey towards the mansion, towards a past that was about to be unearthed and a future yet to be written. The Valdez mansion loomed imposingly against the twilight sky, its windows gleaming with the last rays of the setting sun. For Mateo, it was a reminder of all that he had lost, and at the same time, all that he could still gain. As they entered the grand salon, Rosa, the housekeeper, greeted them with a look of surprise and concern. Mrs. Amelia, we weren't expecting you back so soon. Her voice trailed off as she saw Mateo. It's all right, Rosa, Amelia said. Please make sure we're not disturbed. We have family matters to discuss. Rosa nodded, casting a last puzzled look before withdrawing. Amelia led them to the study, the same room where, days before, she had accused Mateo of theft. Now, with everyone gathered there, the tension was palpable. "Well," Amelia said, taking a seat behind her desk, "I suppose it's time you all knew the truth." Elena, standing by her grandfather's side, took his hand. "We're ready to listen." Amelia took a deep breath. "Camila, Elena, what you are about to hear, it will change everything you think you know about your families." The silence in the study of the Valdez mansion was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. Amelia, seated behind her imposing mahogany desk, looked at those present with a mixture of dread and determination. "Before I begin," said Amelia, her voice barely a whisper, "I want you to know that what I am about to reveal, I have kept it a secret for decades, for what I believed were good reasons." Camilla leaned forward, her eyes filled with confusion and anticipation. "Mom, what are you talking about? What could be so terrible?" Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength. When she opened them, her gaze fell on Mateo. "It all started 45 years ago. I was 18, and Mateo was 21. He had just started working in the mansion's gardens." Elena, standing next to her grandfather, looked at him in surprise. Mateo nodded slightly, silently confirming Amelia's words. "We fell in love," Amelia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "It was an intense, passionate, but forbidden love. I was the boss's daughter, and Mateo, a simple gardener," Mateo finished, speaking for the first time since entering the study. Camilla abruptly stood up. "Wait, what? You two? But how? Why didn't I ever know?" Amelia reached out to her daughter, an almost pleading gesture. "Camilla, please, let me finish. There's more, much more, you need to know." Camilla sank back into her chair, nodding silently. "For months we met in secret," Amelia continued. "In the gardens, in the old greenhouse, wherever we could be alone. We planned to run away, to start a new life together. But something went wrong." "Your father found out," Elena interjected, her mind racing to connect the pieces. Amelia nodded. "He was brutal, threatened to destroy Mateo's family to make sure he never found work anywhere." "And you let him?" Camilla asked. "Was it you?" Camilla asked, her voice tinged with disbelief and disappointment. "I was young and scared," Amelia replied, tears welling up in her eyes. "My father gave me an ultimatum. Either I married the man he had chosen for me, or Mateo and his family would suffer the consequences." Mateo stepped closer to the desk, his presence commanding despite his age. "Amelia, you don't have to shoulder all the blame. I made decisions that night too." "What decisions?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mateo looked at his granddaughter, pain evident in his eyes. "I decided to walk away. I thought it was the best thing for Amelia, for her future. But that's not all," Amelia interrupted, her voice trembling. "There's something else. Something that even Mateo doesn't know." All eyes turned to her. The air in the room seemed to have grown heavier, laden with the weight of long-held secrets. "I was pregnant," Amelia blurted out. The room erupted in a cacophony of voices. "What?" Camilla shouted. "Grandpa, did you know?" Elena asked, turning to Mateo. Mateo was pale, his eyes fixed on Amelia. "No, I had no idea." Amelia raised a hand, asking for silence. "Please, let me finish. When I found out I was pregnant, it was too late. Mateo was gone, and I was already engaged to the man my father had chosen." "Then what did you do?" Camilla asked, her voice barely audible. Amelia took a deep breath. "I got married, and when the baby was born, when you were born, Camilla, I made everyone believe, including my husband, that she was his." The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Camilla rose slowly, her face a mask of shock and confusion. Are you saying that my father, the man who raised me, is not my real father?" Amelia felt tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "Mateo is your biological father, Camilla." The room exploded into chaos again. Camilla staggered back as if she had been physically struck. Elena rushed to her, holding her before she could fall. Mateo approached Amelia, his face a mixture of emotions. Why, Amelia? Why didn't you ever tell me? Amelia looked at him, her eyes pleading. I was afraid, Mateo. Afraid of my father. Afraid of losing everything. And then, as the years passed, the fear turned to shame. Shame for the decisions I had made. For the lies I had told. Camilla freed herself from Elena's grip, walking towards her mother with shaky steps. My whole life has been a lie. How could you do this to me? How could you do this to him? She pointed at Mateo. I'm so sorry, Camilla, Amelia sobbed. I know it's not enough, but I am so deeply sorry. Mateo, still processing the news, approached Camilla. Camilla, I know this is a shock for you. It is for me too. But I want you to know that even though I didn't know, I have always loved you like a daughter. Camilla looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to feel. Elena, watching the scene unfold, intervened. Wait a minute. If Camilla is my grandfather's daughter, that means you two are cousins. Yes, Amelia finished. The two young women stared at each other, a new understanding forming between them. This is too much, Camilla said, stepping away from everyone. I need air. She ran out of the room, leaving the others in an awkward silence. Mateo turned to Amelia. All these years, Amelia, all these years keeping this secret. Why now? Why did you decide to reveal all of this now? Amelia rose, walking around the desk to be closer to him. Because I couldn't bear the weight of the lie anymore. Because when I accused you of theft, I realized how low I had sunk, how my fears and lies had poisoned everything I touched. And the necklace? Elena asked. Did you really believe my grandfather had stolen it? Amelia shook her head. No. Deep down, I knew Mateo was incapable of doing such a thing. But when the necklace disappeared, I panicked. I thought that maybe Mateo had found out everything and was trying to get revenge. That's ridiculous, Mateo said. I would never do such a thing. I know, Amelia admitted, but fear isn't rational. And I've lived with fear for so long that it's become my first reaction to everything. Elena, trying to process all the information, asked, And now what? What does all this mean for us? Before anyone could answer, the study door burst open. Camilla walked in, her face a mixture of determination and anguish. I have something to say, she announced, and I think you all need to hear it. Everyone turned to her expectantly. Camilla took a deep breath. The necklace. I took it, Amelia gasped. What? But why? I have debts, Camilla confessed. Gambling debts. I thought I could sell the necklace, pay off what I owed, and then find a way to get it back before anyone noticed. Oh, Camilla, Amelia sighed. I know. It was stupid. It was, Camilla continued. But I was desperate. And then, when you accused Mateo, my father... She looked at Mateo with a mixture of confusion and affection. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Mateo approached her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. It's all right, Camila. The important thing is that now, the truth is coming out. Amelia sank into her chair, the weight of all the revelations finally hitting her. I've made so many mistakes. I've hurt so many people. Elena, ever practical, intervened. Well, now that we know the truth about the necklace, we can clear Grandpa's name. But what about everything else? What about the truth about Camilla? They all looked at each other, the question hanging in the air. I think, Mateo said slowly, that depends on Camilla. It's her life, the one most affected by these revelations. Camilla looked around at the mother who had raised her with a lie, the father she had just discovered, the cousin she never knew she had. I need time to process all of this. But I know one thing. I don't want any more lies. I don't want any more secrets. Amelia felt tears welling up in her eyes. You're right. No more lies. From now on, only the truth, no matter how painful it may be. But how do we do that? Elena asked. How do we explain all of this to the outside world? One step at a time, Mateo replied. First, we clear my name. Then we can decide together how to handle the rest. Camilla approached Mateo, hesitating for a moment before embracing him. I'm sorry I didn't tell the truth sooner. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry we lost so much time. Mateo hugged her tightly, tears in his eyes. It's not your fault, Camilla. And we have time now. Time to get to know each other. To be a family. Amelia watched them, a mixture of joy and pain on her face. Elena approached her, taking her hand. It won't be easy, Elena said, but I think if we work together, we can get through this. Amelia squeezed her hand gratefully. Thank you, Elena. I know I don't deserve your understanding, but I appreciate it. At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted the scene. Rosa, the housekeeper, peeked her head in. Excuse the interruption, she said, but there's someone here who insists on seeing Mrs. Amelia. Says it's urgent. Amelia frowned. Who is it? It's Mr. Javier, the lawyer, Rosa replied. They all exchanged glances. What could the lawyer want at this hour? Show him in, Amelia said finally. Javier entered, his face serious. Mrs. Valdez, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. The police are on their way. What? Why? Amelia asked, rising to her feet. Someone informed them about the stolen necklace, Javier explained. They're coming with a search warrant. Panic gripped the room. Camilla paled. Oh no! What are we going to do? Mateo, surprisingly calm, spoke. The truth? We're going to tell the truth. Everyone stared at him in surprise. Mateo's right, Amelia said, straightening up. No more lies. We'll face this together, as a family. The sound of sirens in the distance filled the air. The Valdez family, newly reunited and still fragile, prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. As they waited for the police to arrive, the tension in the room was palpable. Camilla paced back and forth, biting her nails nervously. I can't go to jail, she murmured. I wouldn't survive it. Mateo approached her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Calm down, Camilla. We won't let that happen. Amelia, sitting at her desk, seemed to have aged years in a matter of minutes. This is all my fault. If I had told the truth from the beginning. This is no time for regrets, Elena interrupted. We need a plan. Javier, what are our options? The lawyer, who had been reviewing some documents, looked up. Well, the first thing is to be honest with the police. If Camilla confesses voluntarily, that will work in her favor. Besides, given that the necklace hasn't left the property and hasn't been sold, we could argue that it was more of an unauthorized loan than a theft. Camilla let out a bitter laugh. An unauthorized loan. Sounds better than theft, I suppose. And what about the charges against me? Mateo asked. How do we clear my name? Javier nodded. That's the easiest part. Once Camilla confesses, the charges against you will be dropped. The sound of screeching tires in the driveway interrupted the conversation. Everyone tensed. They're here, Elena murmured, peering out the window. Amelia stood up, smoothing her skirt in a nervous gesture. Well, let's face this together. Before they could move, Rosa rushed in. Ma'am, the police are here. They insist on speaking with you immediately. Amelia nodded. Show them in, Rosa. Moments later, 2 police officers entered the study, their faces serious and professional. Mrs. Valdez, one of them began, we have a warrant to search the property for evidence related to the theft of your family's necklace. Amelia raised a hand. Officers, before you proceed, there's something you need to know. There's been a misunderstanding. The policemen exchanged glances. A misunderstanding? Camilla stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. It was me. I took the necklace. The officers looked surprised. Miss, are you confessing to a crime? Yes, Camilla replied, straightening her shoulders. But as you can see, I'm here, willing to cooperate fully. Javier intervened. Officers, my client, Javier began, is willing to make a full statement. But first, there's an urgent matter we must address. He turned towards Mateo. This man was wrongly accused of theft. Now that we have the confession of the real culprit, we demand that all charges against him be dropped. Immediately. The police officers looked increasingly confused. This is unusual, one of them said. I know, Amelia admitted, and I take full responsibility for the confusion. I made a terrible mistake accusing an innocent man. Mateo, who had remained silent, spoke up. I don't seek revenge or compensation. I just want the truth to be known and my name cleared. The ranking officer nodded slowly. All right, here's what we'll do. Miss, he addressed Camilla, you'll need to come with us to make a formal statement. Sir, he looked at Mateo. I suggest you contact the district attorney first thing tomorrow morning to start the process of dropping the charges. As Camilla prepared to leave with the officers, Amelia embraced her tightly. I'm so sorry, my child. I promise we'll fix this. Camilla hugged her back, tears in her eyes. I know, Mom. It's time we faced our mistakes. When the police took Camilla away, a heavy silence fell over the room. It was Elena who finally broke it. Well, that was intense, she said, letting out a shaky breath. Mateo sank into a chair, the weight of the events finally catching up with him. 45 years, he murmured. 45 years of secrets and lies, and it all comes to light in one night. Amelia approached him, hesitating before placing a hand on his shoulder. Mateo, He looked up, his eyes tired but filled with an emotion Amelia couldn't decipher. You know what the most ironic thing is, Amelia? All these years I thought I had lost you forever. And now, I discover that a part of you was always with me, in Camilla. Amelia couldn't hold back her tears. I'm so sorry. If I could go back. But we can't, Elena interrupted. What's done is done. The question is, what do we do now? Javier, who had been reviewing some papers, chimed in. From a legal standpoint, our focus should be on minimizing the consequences for Camilla and ensuring that Mateo's name is completely cleared. And what about the personal side of things, Elena asked. Because frankly, this is an emotional mess. Mateo stood up, his presence suddenly commanding despite his age. Elena's right. We've unearthed decades of secrets and lies. We can't just go back to normal. Amelia nodded, wiping away her tears. You're right. I think we all need time. Time to process, to heal. And Camilla? Elena asked. What will happen to her? I'll do everything in my power to protect her, Amelia said firmly. She's my daughter, our daughter, she glanced at Mateo, and she deserves a second chance. Mateo stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. I agree, and I want to be a part of her life, if she'll allow it. And what about you two? Elena asked, looking between Amelia and Mateo. They stared at each other, decades of unrequited love, resentment, and regret passing between them in an instant. It's complicated, Amelia said finally. It always has been, Mateo added with a sad smile. Elena let out an exasperated sigh. Well, it seems we have a lot of work ahead of us. At that moment, Javier's phone rang. After a brief conversation, he turned to the group. It was the police station. Camilla has made her statement. They're processing it, but due to the circumstances and her cooperation, she'll probably be released on bail tonight. Thank God, Amelia sighed. I'll go pick her up, Elena offered. I think we all need a little space to process all of this. Mateo nodded. Good idea. I think I should leave too. No, Amelia said quickly. Everyone looked at her in surprise. I mean, please stay. I think you and I have a lot to talk about. Mateo looked at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. I suppose we do. As Elena and Javier prepared to leave, Amelia turned to Rosa, who had been observing silently from a corner. Rosa, please prepare the guest room for Mateo, and bring a bottle of the best whiskey we have. I think we're going to need it. Rosa nodded, casting a last curious glance before exiting. Once alone, Amelia and Mateo stared at each other, the weight of 45 years of secrets and unrequited love hanging between them. So, Mateo said softly, where do we begin? Amelia took a deep breath. At the beginning, I suppose. That summer night when everything changed. As they began to unravel decades of lies and regrets, the night wore on, promising a dawn that would bring a new chapter in their intertwined lives. At the police station, Camilla waited nervously in a small interrogation room, her mind reeling from everything that had happened in the last few hours. She had not only confessed to a crime, but she had discovered that her entire life was essentially a lie. The door opened and Elena walked in. Camilla looked up, surprised. What are you doing here? Elena sat down opposite her. I came to get you. You're being released on bail. Camilla let out a bitter laugh. Great. Back to the house of lies. Elena looked at her sympathetically. I know it's a lot to process, but you're not alone in this, you know. I'm not. Camilla looked at her skeptically. My mother lied to me my entire life. The man I thought was my father isn't. And it turns out my real father is the man we wrongly accused of theft. Oh, and apparently we're cousins. Did I forget anything? Elna took her hand. I know it seems like a mess right now, but think of it this way. You've gained a family, an imperfect, complicated, and slightly dysfunctional family, but a family nonetheless. Camilla stared at her for a long moment before her lips curved into a small smile. I suppose you're right. Though I must say, as family reunions go, this one leaves a lot to be desired. They both laughed, releasing some of the tension. So, Camilla said after a moment, what happens now? Elena shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. I guess we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. At that moment, an officer entered to inform them that Camilla was free to go. As they walked out of the police station, Camilla stopped. Elena, she said, her voice serious, thank you for being here. For everything. Elena smiled. That's what family is for. No, really, Camilla insisted. As they headed toward the car, Camilla looked up at the night sky. You know, for the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Elena nodded, putting an arm around her newly discovered cousin's shoulders. They will. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but they will. As the car pulled away from the police station, taking them back to a life that would never be the same, they both felt a mixture of apprehension and hope. The future was uncertain, but at least now they had the truth on their side. Back at the Valdez mansion, Amelia and Mateo were sitting in the study, a glass of whiskey in their hands and decades of history between them. Remember that night in the greenhouse? Amelia asked, her voice soft with nostalgia. Mateo smiled. How could I forget? It was the night we planted those roses. You said they would bloom for our anniversary. And they did, Amelia said. Every year without fail. Even after you left. Amelia, Mateo set his glass down on the table. Why didn't you ever tell me about Camilla? Amelia closed her eyes, pain evident on her face. At first, it was fear. Fear of my father, of what he might do. And then it was shame. Shame for the decisions I had made, for the life I had chosen to live. We could have had a life together, Mateo said softly. I know. Amelia looked at him, tears in her eyes. And that knowledge has haunted me every day since, Mateo leaned forward. And now? What do we do now? Before Amelia could answer, the sound of a car pulling up interrupted the moment. Minutes later, Camilla and Elena walked into the study. The silence that followed was tense, laden with unspoken emotions and newly discovered truths. Finally, Camilla spoke. So, I guess we have a lot to talk about. Amelia nodded, wiping away a tear. Yes, my love. We have a lifetime to do so. Mateo stood up, approaching Camilla tentatively. If you'll allow it, I'd like to be a part of that life. Camilla looked at him, a mixture of emotions on her face. Then slowly she nodded. Elena, watching the scene, smiled. Well, family, it seems this is the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. As dawn began to peek through the study windows, illuminating this newly reunited and redefined family, they all felt a mixture of apprehension and hope. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncomfortable conversations. But for the first time in decades, they were facing that future together, and with the truth on their side. The doorbell of the Valdez mansion echoed, breaking the tense calm that had settled over the house for the past few days. Elena, who was closest to the door, hurried to open it. Javier, she exclaimed, surprised to see the lawyer so early. We weren't expecting you until this afternoon. The lawyer walked in, his face etched with a mixture of worry and urgency. I know, but something's come up. Is everyone awake? Yes, they're in the dining room. Come in. As they walked towards the dining room, Elena couldn't help but notice the tension in Javier's shoulders. Is it about Camilla's case? She asked quietly. Javier shook his head. It's Complicated? I'll explain everything together. Upon entering the dining room, they encountered a scene that, just a week ago, would have seemed impossible. Amelia, Mateo, and Camilla sitting together, sharing breakfast in an awkward but not hostile silence. Amelia was the first to notice their arrival. Javier, what a surprise. Has something happened? The lawyer took a seat, accepting the cup of coffee Rosa offered him with a grateful nod. I'm afraid so. I received a call this morning. Someone has leaked the story to the press. The news hit the room like a bombshell. Camilla dropped her fork, the metallic clang echoing in the sudden silence. What? Amelia gasped. But how? Who? Javier shook his head. I don't know for sure, but I have my suspicions. The point is, by tomorrow, the whole city will know about the necklace, the false accusation against Mateo, and... He paused, glancing at Camilla. Your true parentage. Mateo, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. How bad is it? Pretty bad, Javier admitted. The headline in tomorrow's morning paper reads, Scandal at the Valdez Mansion, Lies, Theft, in a Forbidden Love. Camilla let out a bitter laugh. Well, at least they're accurate. This is not funny, Camilla, Amelia snapped, her face pale. It's not, Camilla replied, her voice laced with sarcasm. Because from where I'm sitting, this whole situation is a goddamn comedy. Camilla, please, Mateo intervened, his voice soft but firm. This affects all of us. We need to stay calm and figure out how we're going to handle this. Elena, who had been observing silently, spoke up. Javier, what are our options? The lawyer sighed. Well, we could try to deny it, but honestly, that would only make things worse in the long run. The truth always comes out eventually. So what do you suggest? Amelia asked, her voice trembling. I think our best option is to control the narrative, Javier replied, to give our version of the story before the rumors, in speculation, spiral out of control. You mean a press conference? Mateo asked, frowning. Javier nodded. Exactly. We can arrange one for this afternoon, present a united front, and tell our story on our terms. Camila abruptly stood up. A united front? Are you serious? A week ago, I didn't even know who my real father was. And now you want us to pretend to be a happy family in front of the cameras? Camilla, please, Amelia pleaded. No, Mom, Camilla interrupted. You can't expect me to just forget decades of lies and pretend everything is fine. Mateo rose slowly, approaching Camilla. No one is asking you to pretend anything, hee-ha. This is as new and difficult for me as it is for you. But Javier is right. If we don't take control of this narrative now, others will do it for us. Camilla looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of conflicting emotions. I don't know if I can do this. Elena stepped closer, placing a hand on her cousin's shoulder. You don't have to do this alone. We're all in this together, remember? There was a moment of tense silence as everyone waited for Camilla's answer. Finally, she let out a sigh of defeat. All right, but on one condition. Anything, Amelia said quickly. I want us to be completely honest, Camilla said, looking at each person in the room. No half-truths or sugarcoating. If we're going to do this, we'll do it with complete transparency. Mateo nodded, a small smile of pride playing on his lips. I agree. We've lived long enough with lies. Amelia seemed less convinced. But what about the repercussions? Our reputation, our businesses. Is that really what matters most now, Mom? Camilla asked, her voice heavy with disappointment. Amelia looked at her daughter, then at Mateo, and finally at Elena. Something seemed to shift in her expression. You're right. I've spent far too long worrying about appearances. It's time I face the truth, no matter the consequences. Javier, who had been taking notes, looked up. All right then, it's decided. I'll arrange the press conference for 3 o'clock this afternoon. That gives us a few hours to prepare. As everyone stood up, ready to face the most challenging day of their lives, Elena noticed something in Camilla's face. Are you okay? She asked quietly. Camilla shook her head. Not really, but I guess this is a start. The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. Javier worked tirelessly on the phone, organizing the press conference and handling inquiries from reporters. Amelia shut herself in her study, presumably to prepare what she would say. Matteo, for his part, decided to spend some time in the gardens, finding peace amongst the plants that had been his life for so many years. Camilla wandered around the mansion, feeling like a stranger in what had been her home her entire life. Eventually, she found herself in the old library, a place that had always been her refuge. "I thought I'd find you here," a voice said from the doorway. It was Elena. Camilla smiled weakly. "I guess some things never change." Elena walked in, sitting down beside her cousin on the old leather sofa. "How are you holding up?" "Really?" Camilla let out a shaky breath. "Honestly, I don't know. A part of me is furious, another part is hurt, and another part is excited to have the chance to get to know my real father." "That's understandable," Elena said softly. "There's no handbook for dealing with something like this." "You know what the strangest thing is?" Camilla continued. "My whole life, I felt like there was something off, like I didn't truly fit in. And now, knowing the truth, somehow, it all makes sense." Elena took her hand. "You're incredibly strong, Camilla. I don't know if I could handle all of this with such grace." Camilla let out a laugh. "Grace? I literally stole a family heirloom and almost sent my biological father to jail." "Well, when you put it like that," Elena joked, managing to elicit a genuine smile from Camilla. Their moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Matteo. "Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, hesitating at the threshold. "It's all right. Come in," Camilla said, surprising herself with how easily the words came out. Matteo walked in, holding something in his hands. I found this while I was in the garden. I thought maybe you'd like to see it." He handed Camilla an old photograph. In it, a young Amelia smiled radiantly at the camera, her arm linked with a young Matteo's. Behind them, a field of roses in full bloom. "Oh my God," Camilla whispered, her fingers tracing the young and happy faces of her parents. "It was taken the day we planted those roses," Matteo explained, his voice thick with nostalgia. "It was one of the happiest days of my life." Camilla looked at Matteo. Really? She was truly seeing him for the first time since learning the truth. "Tell me about that day," she asked softly. Matteo sat down, his eyes shining with memories. "It was spring. Your mother had convinced her father that she wanted a new rose garden, but she insisted that I be the one to design and plant it. We spent the entire day working under the sun, laughing, dreaming of the future." As Matteo spoke, painting a vivid picture of a young and hopeful love, Camilla felt something shift within her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The afternoon arrived all too quickly. Before they knew it, they were in the living room, preparing to face the press. Amelia, impeccably dressed as always, seemed to have aged years in a matter of hours. "Is everyone ready?" she asked, her voice betraying her nervousness. Matteo nodded, adjusting his tie. "As ready as we can be." Camilla, who had opted for a simple black dress, took a deep breath. "I guess it's now or never." Javier entered, his expression serious. "The garden is packed with reporters. Remember, stay calm, be honest, and if you feel overwhelmed, give me the signal and I'll end the conference." They stepped out into the garden where a throng of reporters and cameras awaited them. The flash of cameras and the murmur of voices created an overwhelming cacophony. Javier approached the makeshift podium. "Good afternoon. The Valdez family has decided to make a statement regarding recent events. Please save your questions for the end." He stepped aside, allowing Amelia to take his place. She looked out at the crowd, then at her family before beginning. "For decades, I have lived a lie," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "A lie that has hurt the people I love most. Today, I am here to tell the truth, no matter the consequences." As Amelia spoke, revealing the story of her forbidden love with Matteo, Camilla's birth, and the decisions she made out of fear and ambition, Camilla watched the reactions of the journalists: shock, disbelief, and in some cases, a sort of reluctant understanding. When Amelia finished, it was Matteo's turn. He spoke of his love for Amelia, how he left the mansion believing it was the best for everyone, and the pain of discovering he had a daughter he never knew. "But I am here today," he concluded, not to assign blame or seek compensation, but to accept my share of responsibility and to try to build a relationship with the daughter I just discovered. Finally, it was Camilla's turn. She stepped up to the podium, acutely aware of all eyes on her. "A week ago," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, "I thought I knew who I was. Today I'm here, trying to reconcile the life I thought I had with the truth I've just discovered. I made mistakes. I made bad decisions. But I am here, facing the consequences of my actions and those of my parents." She paused, looking at Amelia and Mateo. "I don't know what the future holds for our family. I can't promise that everything will be perfect or that we'll get through this unscathed. But I can promise that from now on, we will live in truth, no matter how difficult it may be." When Camilla finished, there was a moment of silence before the garden erupted in a cacophony of questions. Javier quickly intervened, taking control of the situation and selecting reporters one by one. "Mrs. Valdez," one reporter asked, "how do you expect this to affect your businesses and your standing in society?" Amelia took a deep breath before answering. "Frankly, that is no longer my primary concern. I have spent too long prioritizing status and appearances over truth and love. That ends today." "Mr. Mateo," another journalist called out, "you were wrongly accused of theft. Do you plan to take legal action against the Valdez family?" Mateo shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "No, I will not. What I seek is not revenge, but reconciliation. Besides," he added, looking at Camilla with affection, "discovering I have a daughter is more valuable to me than any monetary compensation. It's more valuable to me than any monetary compensation." The questions continued, each one more personal and pointed than the last. Camilla watched as her parents handled the situation with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Finally, a journalist addressed her. "Miss Valdez, or should I say Miss Rodriguez," the man began, referring to Mateo's last name, "you admitted to taking the necklace. How do you respond to accusations that this is all an elaborate ruse to avoid facing charges for theft?" Camilla felt the air leave her lungs. For a moment, panic threatened to take over, but then she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Elena, who had stepped forward in silent support. Taking a deep breath, Camilla replied, "I understand why someone might think that, but I assure you, nothing could be further from the truth. I made a mistake, one that I am willing to face, but discovering the truth about my origins, that is not something I could have concocted, even in my wildest dreams." She paused, looking at Amelia and Mateo. "I am here facing my mistakes and trying to rebuild my life on a foundation of truth. I don't expect everyone to understand or accept it right away. I only ask for the opportunity to prove, through my future actions, that I have learned from my mistakes." Her response seemed to momentarily quiet the press. Javier, sensing it was the right time, stepped up to the podium. "That will be all for today," he announced. "The Valdez family thanks you for your time and asks for respect and privacy as they navigate this difficult transition. Thank you." As the family retreated from the garden, the murmur of journalists rose again. Camilla could hear snippets of conversations, speculation about the future of the Valdez company, about potential lawsuits, about the social scandal that this all represented. Once inside the mansion, away from the scrutinizing eyes of the press, Camilla collapsed onto the nearest sofa. "Well," she said, her voice shaky, "that was intense." "It was," Elena agreed, sitting beside her. Amelia approached her daughter, hesitating a moment before sitting down next to her. "You did very well, Camilla. I'm proud of you." Camilla looked at her, surprised. She couldn't remember the last time her mother had said those words to her. "Thank you, Mom," she murmured. Mateo, who had been standing by the window, turned to them. "And now what?" he asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. Javier, who had just entered the room, replied, "Now, we prepare for the fallout. The press is going to be on you for a while. There will be speculation, rumors, and you will probably lose business partners." "Maybe," Amelia added, her tone resigned. "Maybe," Javier conceded, "but you might gain others too. There are those who will appreciate your honesty and bravery." Camilla stood up abruptly. I'm sorry. I, I need a moment. Without waiting for a response, she hurried out of the room. Mateo made to follow her, but Elena stopped him with a gesture. Let me go, she said softly. Mateo nodded in understanding. Elena found Camilla in the back garden, sitting on the old swing that hung from the century-old oak tree. She approached silently, sitting down next to her. Remember when we were little and we'd spend hours here? She asked, her gaze lost in the distance. How could I forget? Elena smiled. We planned our grand adventures on this swing. Everything seemed so simple then. I know, Camilla sighed. But you know what? Elena replied. I think we're on the cusp of our biggest adventure yet. Camilla looked at her confused. What do you mean? Think about it, Elena explained. We're rediscovering our family, confronting hidden truths, defying societal expectations. If that's not an adventure, I don't know what is. For the first time in days, Camilla let out a genuine laugh. I guess you're right, though I must admit, I'd prefer an adventure with less family drama and more, I don't know, pirates? Elena laughed with her. Hey, you never know. Maybe we'll discover we're heirs to some lost pirate treasure or something. Their moment of levity was interrupted by the arrival of Mateo. He stopped a few feet away, as if unsure whether his presence was welcome. Can I join you? He asked tentatively. Camilla looked at him for a moment before nodding. Mateo approached, sitting down on the grass in front of them. I used to watch you play here, he said softly. From afar, of course. I never dared to get too close. Camilla felt her heart clench. Why not? Mateo sighed. Fear, I suppose. Fear that someone would notice how I looked at you. Fear that I wouldn't be able to hide what I felt. And most of all, fear of causing you trouble. But you're here now, Camilla said. Mateo nodded. Now I am. And if you'll allow it, I'd like to stay. I know I can't make up for lost time. But we can start anew. Camilla extended her hand towards him. Hi, I'm Camilla. It's, nice to meet you. Dad. Mateo took her hand, tears in his eyes. The pleasure is all mine. Hee-ha. Elena watched the scene unfold with a mixture of joy and nostalgia. At that moment, Amelia appeared on the back porch. Am I interrupting something? She asked, her voice unusually timid. Camilla looked at her mother, then at Mateo, and finally at Elena. She took a deep breath before answering. No, Mom. In fact, I think you came just in time. Why don't you join us? Amelia descended the steps slowly, as if afraid that a sudden movement might shatter the fragile peace that had settled. She sat down next to Mateo, forming a small circle on the grass. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence, however, wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of four people who, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel the need to fill the air with lies or pretense. Finally, it was Camilla who broke the silence. So, anyone have any idea how a normal family is supposed to work? They all laughed, the tension breaking like a bubble. I think normal is an overrated concept, Elena said with a smile. I agree, Mateo added. Besides, where would the fun be in being normal? Amelia, surprising everyone, was the next to speak. You know, I spent so long trying to maintain a facade of perfection that I forgot what truly matters. Maybe it's time we learn to be a real family, with all our flaws and complications. Camilla looked at her mother with a new appreciation. I like the sound of that. As the sun began to set, dyeing the sky in warm hues, the newly redefined Valdez family remained in the garden, sharing stories, laughing at old memories, and slowly beginning to heal. It wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult days ahead, uncomfortable conversations, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in decades, there was hope. Hope for a future built on truth, forgiveness, and unconditional love. As the shadows lengthened and the first stars appeared in the sky, Camilla looked around, at her mother whose eyes shone with a new kind of determination, at Mateo, her newly discovered father, whose warm smile promised years of love to come, at Elena, her cousin and best friend, a pillar of strength and understanding. And in that moment, Camilla knew that no matter what the future held, they would face every challenge, every joy and every sorrow together. Because that is what families do, real families.